expert has said that anybody who wants health care under my plan will be able to obtain it. President Clinton's own Secretary of Labor has said that my plan does more to reduce costs and, as a consequence, make sure that the people who need health care right now, all across Ohio, all across Texas, Rhode Island, Vermont, all across America, will be able to obtain it. And we do more to reduce costs than any other plan that's been out there. Now, I have no objection to Senator Clinton thinking that her approach is superior, but the fact of the matter is that if, as we've heard tonight, we still don't know how Senator Clinton intends to enforce a mandate, and if we don't know the level of subsidies that she's going to provide, then you can have a situation, which we're seeing right now in the state of Massachusetts, where people are being fined for not having purchased health care, but choose to accept the fine because they still can't afford it even with the subsidies. And they are then worse off. They then have no health care and are paying a fine above and beyond that. That is a genuine difference between myself and Senator Clinton. And the last point I would make is the insurance companies actually are happy to have a mandate. The insurance companies don't mind making sure that everybody has to purchase their product. That's not something they're objecting to. The question is, are we going to make sure that it is affordable for everybody? And that's my goal when I'm President of the United States. We don't want to put in a situation in which on the front end we are mandating them, we are forcing them to purchase insurance, and if the subsidies are inadequate, the burden is on them and they will be penalized. And that
video may be shocking to some people, especially youth, younger voters, who weren't necessarily aware, and this wasn't within their political memory. I am an old man. This is well within my political memory. This is not within my wife's political memory. It is within my political memory. This is Barack Obama arguing with Hillary Clinton, going after her because Hillary Clinton said in order to make healthcare work, you have to have an individual mandate. Obama said, yeah, you don't have to have an individual mandate. And how dare you say you're going to force people to buy healthcare? There is no way you should be able to force people to pay health care. And Mrs. Clinton, who's sitting here across from me, is saying that I, Barack Obama, will do the exact same health care plan without forcing an individual mandate. I won't do that. So I am the better choice in regards to the person to vote for because I, Barack Obama, don't believe in an individual mandate. What's wrong with this argument? What's wrong with this argument? The moment that Obama got out of the primary, this was forgotten. This was forgotten. I didn't forget. I didn't forget it at all because the first thing I remember was when Obama got in office, the individual mandate came back, meaning everything that Clinton said to him in this particular moment, whatever you want to think of Clinton's honesty, was right. Obama was lying through his teeth in this moment, and nobody cared when he was running against John McCain that in this very specific moment, going after Hillary Clinton, he was lying. Why am I bringing this up? Why am I showing this? Medicare for All has become one of the policy discussions that we've been talking about in all of the campaigns within the Democratic primary, has been trying to get as close to Medicare for All as possible or to appropriate Medicare for All as a concept. Just so we're very clear, and I want to define my terms. This is S1129. It's a bill, a legal document. Medicare for All Act of 2019. Senator Bernie Sanders introduced this. Jamarl introduced the version in the House. Both of these are bills. These two bills will have to be signed by a president in order to become law. Medicare for All is not a concept. It's not subjective. It is a bill. Either you are for it or you are not. The campaigns that have been running have been using Medicare for All in subjective showpiece terms in order to confuse and trick the American public. I will not do such. Medicare for All is a bill. You're either for it or you're against it. Elizabeth Warren has just released a payment plan for something she's calling Medicare for All. Fact of the matter is what she released is an outright disaster of a showpiece that I don't have much good stuff to say about it because I got to be honest, I don't know what this funding mechanism is to pay for. Medicare for All is a bill. The person who wrote that bill gave various ways in order to pay for that particular bill. The catch is the president is not a king. Ultimately, the president can only give suggestions and examples and ways for getting that cash in order to pay for the bill, but ultimately he's going to have to haggle and wrangle with Congress in order to come up with some funding mechanism to pay for the plan that he wants to pay for. Warren, who's claimed she's for Medicare for All, has departed from Bernie Sanders in how to pay for whatever she's talking about paying for. And what she's released is an outright disaster. It's been described as a unicorn trying to pay for a unicorn, and that was by an Obama guy. It's that bad. I'm going to go into parts of this bill in order to explain the problems with this. It's logically doesn't work. Meaning, Sanders is not hiding the ball from you. Sanders has told you that the middle class will have to pay more, but their ultimate expenses will dramatically go down. The reason that Sanders told you this is because he's being honest with you, and that most of the media, most of the public, for the most part, expect that if you're getting rid of your point of sale costs, meaning you go and you get your doctor's visit, you get your surgery, that there will be some way of leveling off in order to pay for what you're getting. Warren didn't want to admit that middle class taxes would go up in order to fund health care. She went initially with this notion of savings, but she got cowed and browbeat and essentially pushed into fighting for Medicare, meaning explaining how she was going to pay for her plan without middle class taxes going up. And she put out her plan that she's calling as a concept, Medicare for All. I don't believe Warren is for Medicare for All. This is massively unworkable and will most likely be ditched the moment that she gets out of the primary, just like Obama ditched this notion of not paying for the individual mandate. I show the Obama-Clinton clip because people forget. I don't. I remember that healthcare is personal and is important to me for obvious reasons. And when somebody is hiding the ball or not being honest, I try to own them on it because it is dramatically important, not just to me, but to all people across the United States. You shouldn't hide the ball. You should be honest. And Warren is not being honest. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. Many of the people who are new to this channel, my stuff is freezing. Many of the people who are new to this channel may not know this, but when I was 17, I was diagnosed with kidney failure. Apparently, this went back all the way to when I was apparently around 12 and presented, or finally got to the point of presenting when I was 17 and the body couldn't necessarily compensate. There are all sorts of experiences in my life that bring me to this particular disposition that I have. But this very specific one makes me pretty hard on various candidates when I think they're being disingenuous or when I think they're trying to lie to the American public. Yang, trying to say, yes, I'm trying to take the name, but I'm not going to take the substance. Harris, who's calling whatever the hell she's coming up with Medicare for All, even though the thing is supposed to take 10 years. And yes, also Warren, who I don't believe for 1 second backs Medicare for All and will ditch it, just like Obama ditched it, and do whatever she says and call it Medicare for All. And the public, because she is running against Trump, will accept it. I won't. I won't. Elizabeth Warren has made 2 mistakes. The first mistake was when she was being ribbed as a Native American. And Warren comes out, and what does she do? She gets a test, and the test proves that she has as much Native American in her as my dog, Pitsu. This is Pitsu. For all intents and purposes, you can call him a Native American too. He has just as much Native American in him as Elizabeth Warren, according to the blood tests that she took. My point is, she didn't learn the first time around. So now, being ribbed by the other Democrats in the race, she goes out and tries to get a detailed, specific policy proposal. After all, they kept saying, hey, it's amazing that the person who has a policy for everything doesn't have a policy for the most important thing in this race. Her initial argument was right. When she was on the debate stage and she stood beside Sanders and says, Sanders and I are 1-to-1 on this. I'm for Medicare for all too. Great. And the people on the stage who knew she was bogus kept asking her, how do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? And she says, I'm coming out with a policy proposal. And Warren did just that. She came out with a policy proposal. I put it to you this way. This policy proposal is a showpiece. It is a showpiece. It's not real. Truth is, whatever the president wants, it has to be negotiated and haggled with by Congress, meaning it is impossible for a presidential candidate to put out exactly how, in specific detail, they're going to come up with this stuff. And if they are, I'm sorry, they are not being honest. And this plan has several red flags that should be of concern to anyone that is pushing for Medicare for all. And by the way, it does not advance the cause of single payer, because this will be attacked relentlessly, and it is already being attacked relentlessly. I just said an Obama guy saying it's like a unicorn paid for a unicorn. Also, she's not being entirely honest about her plan already. Bernie Sanders has been thinking about this for 40 years. He's been thinking about single payer for a very long time. He has looked around the world and figured out how other countries pay for it. And if I'm being honest with you, the American public would expect their taxes to go up, especially if their services or the point of sale goes away. It would be weird if it didn't, right? There are other reasons that I think a payroll tax is better, just from the standpoint of the psychological part. But let's get into the basics of the red flags and the problems with it. Your costs under Medicare for all will go dramatically down. Even if you see a moderate increase in your taxes, your costs will go dramatically down. The amount that you're bringing home goes dramatically down. That argument is perfectly sound. She initially went with that argument, but being cowed on this notion and deviating from Sanders on this notion of a middle class tax increase, she didn't want to say it, and so she comes up with this plan to try to explain away how are you going to do this without having an increase in taxes. Let me show you a basic point. Expenses. Warren's plan is a head tax. It's a middle class. It's a payroll head tax. It's an employer head tax. Matt Bruenick went and did the research on this, and I have to be honest, it leaps out at you immediately the problems with this. Where Sanders is calling for a percentage, meaning how much you pay and how much the employer pays is determined by how much that person makes. If a person makes $15,000 a year, an 8% employer tax, because we're taking off the payroll tax because Warren is not doing that, but an 8% employer tax on somebody who's making $15,000 a year would yield $1,200 that employer has to pay for that employee for their health care. Warren has a blunt, flat rate of $9,500. Think about what that means. Think about what that means. If you were an employer and you needed to hire somebody, let's say to do video work, and in hiring that person to do video work, let's say you were paying that person $15,000 a year. You have 53 people in your company. Under Warren's plan, you have to pay $9,500 for that worker. Think about what that means. You're paying half of what that person is making in wages as a head tax. Do you hire that person? No, you don't. You do not hire that person. Under Sanders' plan, that's a percentage. Meaning, instead of paying the $9,500 for somebody who's making $15,000, you end up paying $1,200. Which, yes, you hired that person under those terms. If you are making $200,000 a year under Sanders' 8% tax, that person, that company will end up paying $16,000. You're paying that worker $200,000 a year under Sanders' plan, 8% tax, $200,000. Under Warren's plan, $9,500. Meaning it's a regressive tax. She's giving a head tax that is a fixed dollar amount that regardless of what the person makes, regardless of what the company is paying that person, Warren is trying to get $9,500 out of the company, regardless, again, of what the employee makes. This is punitive, massively so. And it comes up with certain problems. Matt Brunick, doing the analysis with this, was showing this point of, if an employee wages goes up, the amount that Sanders is trying to get also goes up. Because again, it's an 8% tax that's dependent upon the person earnings. Warren's doesn't matter what the person earning is. So if a person is making $15,000, Warren wants the company to pay the exact same amount as if the person was making $200,000. This notion that to each, according to their ability to pay, goes out the window under what Warren is trying to pull. I find this to be astonishing. There are also loopholes, massive loopholes. If the person is an independent contractor, doesn't count. Meaning if a company hires somebody that's an independent contractor, they don't have to pay a head tax on that person because they're an independent contractor. Or if you're a company, what are you going to do? We need to hire more independent contractors. And beyond that point, if under 50 people within a company, meaning if your company is 50 people or less, you're exempt. What do you think companies are going to do? The last company I worked at had like 53 people. I will tell you what they're going to do. They're going to find a reason to fire 3 of those people so they can be exempt. Medicare for All is a major change in your society and your economy. And those changes will have outsized influence, even if you might think these are kind of minor differences between Sanders and Warren's plan. I'm sorry, they are not minor differences. 2 more points. Immigration. Warren ties immigration into her plan, meaning the way she's trying to pay for this plan is including immigration reform. That is astonishing. Somebody made the point Mexico is trying to pay for Elizabeth Warren's healthcare plan. The only reason she would do this, meaning bend herself into a pretzel like this, is to get rid of this notion of the payroll tax. That's the only reason. And the fact of the matter is, people won't necessarily have a major issue with you increasing their taxes if they are saving massively from the standpoint of their expenses. Meaning, if I am bringing home $61,000 instead of $65,000, I don't care if you raise my taxes. She deviated from that and she abandoned that very specific perspective. Also, she's going with this notion of military reform, meaning the amount of money that we pay in the military. And by cutting the military budget, she's going to be able to somehow transfer that money into healthcare. This is astonishing considering that Warren backed, supported, voted for, and despite calling the military budget absolutely corrupt, voted for that military budget. And now she's saying she's going to cut that military budget, something that I don't see any of the other Democrats doing, even though Sanders is saying the same thing, but Sanders didn't vote for that military budget. Warren did. Just to make this point clear, Matt Brewing said the only reason that Warren will use a head tax is because she thinks she can trick journalists into declaring that this is not a tax, since it's expressed in dollar terms rather than percentage. Think for yourself for the moment. Think for yourself. If you had a company, what would you do? Companies do everything that they can in their power to evade taxes. The payroll tax can't be evaded, or at the very least is extremely difficult to evade, because whether you're an independent contractor or whether you are working at a company the payroll tax remains intact. Under Warren's plan, she's found ways or given ways for them to essentially evade the head tax that she is talking about. And let's be very clear, she's hiding the ball. Under Sanders' plan, the employer, the worker, pays a percentage. The company pays a percentage. Sanders' idea is that by allowing employers to get a tax cut from Medicare for All, that they would give that in wages to the employee. Warren's plan is taxing 98% of what the company was already paying for healthcare, meaning there are no new wages that you could give that particular employee because all of that is going into her head tax. I hope you understand what I mean. Whether or not the employer would give that money back to the employee in wages, meaning the money that they're saving in regards to Sanders' bill and the way he's organized his bill, is unclear. But at the very least, the money is there for them to do that. Under Warren's plan, she's charging 98% of what they were paying already for healthcare, meaning that money is not going back to the employee in wages because for the most part, all of the money is just going as a head tax. And again, I make the point that if you have a worker who is making, let's say, $30,000 a year, $9,500 is a major percent of that person's wage. So if I'm a company and I want to hire somebody for $30,000 a year, I have to add on $9,500 to that because that is the head tax that Warren is going to charge to hire that worker. I'm sorry, this plan is a mess. Prescription drugs. I'm unclear on what Warren is charging for prescription drugs, so I looked it up. We must start by passing a bill to put a $500 monthly cap on what families pay out of pocket for prescriptions. Under Sanders' plan, that is $200 for the year. Warren is talking about $500 for the month. I don't know who can pay that. I mean, look, the majority of the Americans don't have $500 in the bank, let alone able to pay $500 for prescriptions per month. That is atrocious. Sanders' plan is $200 the year for the year. One last point. FDR, 2 points. Sanders responded to this, by the way. Sanders put out a comment that basically said, well, it depends on how do you define a tax as I understand it. Senator Warren is placing what you might call a head tax on $9,500 on every employer who employs more than 60 people. Actually, it's 50. All that means for the employer to hire a person, it will cost an additional $9,500. Paying somebody $30,000 or $40,000, yeah, that's a big chunk. That's almost a third of what you were going to hire and pay a person. If somebody was hiring you to do a job for $30,000, and let's say you had a company that had 52 people, 53 people, a third of what you were going to pay them in wages is now going to have to be paid as a head tax. She's hiding the ball. Would an employer lower your wages if they had to pay a $9,500 head tax in order to try to create some kind of compensation for the $9,500 head tax? Yes, that's exactly what they're going to do. Will an employer spin off people into independent contractor status in order to avoid paying their head tax? Yes, that's exactly what they would do. The last company that I worked at had roughly 53, 54 people that worked there. What do you think they're going to do for the 3 or 4 people that work there in order to evade what Elizabeth Warren is trying to push? I guess my point is, it's unworkable in the sense that A, it allows multiple aspects of evasion. B, she's adding in immigration and military, something that seems that it might be somewhat difficult to pull off, especially if you're tying it into this notion of healthcare. And she creates a disincentive for hiring. And not just a disincentive for hiring, like I said, spitting people off into independent contractor status or just paying people less wages. And whether you want to say you're charging people a payroll tax or whether an employee themselves decide to pay that person less wages, same difference. One is just hiding the ball. Not to mention, it is It's less efficient. The amount of money that you're able to pull, it's one thing to say for each according to their means, meaning the amount that a person is getting paid, the employer is paid a percentage based on the amount that the person is paid. If that person is making $200,000, a head tax ends up with a regressive tax that the employer pays the exact same amount on that person making $200,000 as a person who is making $15,000. That is astonishing that you would put out a plan like this. Sanders, let me continue with Sanders because I got off the point. Well, it depends on what you define as a tax. As I understand it, Senator Warren placing what you might call an employer head tax on everyone who employs on everyone who employs more than 60. I'm pretty sure it's 50. And all that means is for the employer to hire a new person, it would cost an additional $9,500. Paying somebody $30,000 or $40,000, yeah, that's a big chunk. I think that would probably have a very negative impact on creating jobs and providing wages, increased wages of benefits for those employees. Yes, it's not a leap of logic for that. If you're telling a company that now they have to pay an additional $9,500 for every employee, regardless of what that employee is earning, be it $200,000 or $15,000, she's implementing a regressive head tax in order to try to hide the ball of this notion of payroll increases. The employer themselves are going to lower wages in regards to what they're going to pay people because Warren has the $9,500. She just doesn't want to own up to the fact that a payroll tax. She's bending herself over backwards to avoid this notion of a middle class tax increase. She's going to be eaten alive for this, by the way. Joe Biden has already been attacking her on this, essentially saying she is hiding the ball. She is undercutting the amount of things going to cost while overplaying the amount that she's going to get on the various proposals that she's putting forward. Not to mention, if you don't believe that the middle class will have to pay more in order to get Medicare for all, I don't know why you don't believe that. And I take you back to the Obama-Clinton debate, or Obama being disingenuous and Clinton looking at him like he's crazy, saying the independent mandate is horrible. I can't believe you're going to have an independent mandate, and then getting in office and implementing an independent mandate. History is repeating itself. That is my point. One last point that I want to get to, and just finish with Sanders. So I think I have a better way, which is a payroll tax, which is far more progressive. Our tax proposals exempts the first $29,000 in income. So if you make $50,000, you're paying taxes on $31,000. So you pay 4%, which will be $1,200 a year, which will be much, much less than what he's going to say is Warren's plan. One of the things that Warren said too that I thought was funny, she's arguing that there are no new payroll taxes, but I hope you heard what Sanders just said. One of the proposals in Warren's plan is that because people aren't paying directly that money to corporations, they're getting their money back in wages. And her thought is, well, we can now tax those wages that those people are getting. Yes, but isn't that a tax? She's doing everything that she can to turn herself into a pretzel to not own up to payroll taxes, ignoring her initial argument that was right. She should have just said, I'm with Sanders. And they could have argued this as if they were a one-to-one, but now she's created a deviation between herself and Sanders, which makes this a policy discussion, what Sanders can ding her on, and with the rest of the Democratic field hitting her for being dishonest. Joe Biden's argument is that Elizabeth Warren is dishonest. And I would wager to you that the other Democrats on that debate stage will say the exact same thing. Sanders is not hiding the ball. Sanders is saying payroll taxes will have to go up. Elizabeth Warren is being dishonest. She's made another mistake. This is just as bad as the Native American thing. And mark my words, she will pay for this when she gets on the debate stage. I strongly suspect she has a glass jaw. Last point. Dishonesty. Just dishonesty. This is Warren talking about her tax plan. Now, I don't know if Warren read CNN, but CNN if you just read what CNN wrote about her tax plan, gets across that what she's saying here is not true.
Just to expand on what Zach was asking, is there a salary or income that you would define as middle class when you say no middle class tax?
Sure, for Medicare for all, it's $1 billion. I mean, everyone understand this. This is no increase in taxes for anyone except billionaires. Period. Done. This is about access to health care for everyone. This is about taking that $11 trillion that families will be reaching in their pockets to pay over the next 10 years and bringing that to zero. And
Let me see if I can find a video that's a little bit louder than this one. But I hope you heard what she said. Essentially, no one under $1 billion. That's not true. That's not true. Let me see if I can find a better video than this. But she's arguing that nobody under $1 billion will be paying more. The capital gains tax by itself. I have a pot stock. And if I trade that pot stock, there would be a small percentage that I would have to pay as a transaction tax. That's a tax. I'm not a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination. I am under a billionaire, and I am paying for that. The employer head tax. If somebody had a company and they were making $200 million, the employer head tax in and of itself gets across that they are paying more. All I'm saying is this plan is problematic, to say the least. I will not be the only one saying this. And when she gets on the debate stage in November, I think Elizabeth Warren will have things to answer for, especially within the context of this plan. This is convoluted, which equals the people getting screwed. What I honestly think is that she got pushed into a corner on Medicare for all. And in being pushed into a corner on Medicare for all, she, instead of sticking with, well, this is, expenses will go down, she got stuck in a corner. She didn't want to own up to the fact that the middle class would have to pay some of the healthcare costs. The fact is they're paying their healthcare costs now. What does it matter if they're paying their healthcare costs in taxes, especially if the taxes are going to go down? She didn't want to stay with that. She deviated from Sanders, and she didn't want to own up to an increase in taxes for the middle class. Fine, you did that. And now you are going to suffer because of that. And all of these campaigns are going to essentially deluge this bill. This is not helpful from the standpoint of a single payer plan. And I got to be honest, it's a disaster. By the way, there's something to be said about people believing and feeling that they're paying for their own health care. FDR made the point that part of the reason that he put Social Security as a payroll tax is because you cannot rip it from people the moment that people realize that they have a stake in it. Meaning, how can the Republican Party get rid of Social Security and Medicare when people feel like they're paying for Social Security and Medicare? She's decapitated this notion of the individual paying for their health care. And I don't necessarily think that's positive. I don't, in the least. I'll leave it here. I think Warren's trying to hide the ball. And she comes up with a convoluted plan in pursuit of doing so. This video has gone long. Hopefully, I made my point in a way that wasn't as convoluted as Warren's plan. The best example that I heard, or the best dig, was she's using a unicorn to pay for a unicorn. That sounds about right. I'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.